Bonjour mes amis. Aujourd'hui, we are going to review what we already talked in class about how to conjugate a verb. First of all, remember what's a verb? A verb is an action word, such as running, to run, right? To eat or to drink. They're all these that represents actions. That means that they are verbs. Now, how do we conjugate a verb? First of all, we have to know on which category the verb belongs to. In French, we have three groups. We have group number 1, group number 2, and group number 3. Okay, so I know I have three groups, but how would I know if I'm picking a verb such as aimer or parler, to love or to talk? How would I know in which category it belongs to? So if I'm gonna look at the action verb and if I know, I'm gonna see what's the ending sound, right? Everything, all the verbs that finish in er, that means they belong to group number 1. Now all the verbs or action words that finish in the sound or in the syllable ir, right, ear, that means that belongs to group number 2. But if a verb that it finish in re, that means that belongs to group number 3. Now, why is it important to know if a group or if a verb belongs to group number 1, group number 3, and group number 2 or 3? It's important because it's going to help me to conjugate the verb, right? In English, it's so easy because if we, let's say we're thinking of the verb to eat, I'm just going to say I eat, you eat, he eats, she eats, right? We eat, you eat, they eat. The verb, it doesn't change as much. Well, in French, the verb is gonna change from every single pronoun. Okay, so that's why it's important to know if a verb belongs to group number 1, group number 2, or group number 3. Now let's look specifically on each category. If I'm going to look for group number 1, as I said, the verb has to finish in er. And I'll give you an example of a verb, regarder. If you're looking, regarder, right, means to look. Let's see at the end, we're gonna see er. That means now I know regarder or to look represent, it belongs to group number 1. Let's look of a verb that belongs to group number 2. How would I know that? I'll give you, for example, the verb finir. Now look at the ending syllable, right? Ir. Now I know finir belong because it has the EIR at the end. I know it belongs to group number 2. And we are looking at a verb that finishes in RE. This is what an irregular verb or a verb irrégulier, prendre or to take. If you're going to look at the end, you're gonna see RE. So that means I know the verb goes to number 3, the group number 3. Now again, we are going to learn about group number 1, group number 2, or group number 3. Little by little. Right now we are just focusing on the verbs that finish with er or they belong to group number 1. How would I know how to conjugate this verb? Well, what do I have to know first? I have to memorize this termination. E, es, e, ons, ez, and ent, right? Those are very important because all the verbs is gonna require to have this termination. As soon as we know this by heart, it's going to be very easy to work and very easy to conjugate. But let's take an example. How are we going to conjugate a verb? And I choose the verb regarder, to look. Again, how do I know if this verb belongs to group number 1, group number 2, or group number 3? I'm looking at the end of the verb and I see er. Now I know immediately that er represents group number 1. So I know the termination for group number 1 are e, es, e, ons, ez, and ent. This is going to help me to conjugate this verb. Now, how would I conjugate the verb regarder and where do I start? The first thing I'm going to do, I will write down le pronom personnel that we already know and then we went over again and again. What are le pronom personnel? First, we have le pronom personnel première personne or singulier, right? Which is je. I'm gonna write down this in the notebook. The same Also, when I make sure when I write them in the notebook, I'm gonna write them one under the other, right? I'm not gonna write them je and then the other one here on the line. I'm just gonna continue write them down one under the other. So I have je. If you know what's the next one, you have to pause the video and just write down the pronoun personnel. If not, just stay with me and we're gonna work on these pronouns together. Then we have tu, il or elle, right? Nous, vous, il, elle. Now, don't think I have to tell you in English what those pronouns means. You know, I don't have to translate them, but just to make it a little easier for you, I will tell you this one time. Je, I, tu, you, il, he, elle, she, nous, we, vous, you, il, they. When I say they, I mean only what the boys, and elle, they, but now I'm referring to girls or the feminine. So now let's see, how do I conjugate? So I'm gonna take the pronoun personnel, the première personne, je, and I will take the base of the verb. What's the base of the verb? I'm going to look regarder. I'm gonna, let's see if I can write here. I'm gonna choose the pen. I'm gonna look at this termination er because I know that represents, that's how it tells me where the verb it belongs to which group, right? And I'm going to take this down and I'm gonna find out the root. What's the root of my verb? Regard. So this is exactly what I'm gonna write here. Regard. Je regarde. And I'm gonna continue writing the roots on each pronoun personnel. Tu regardes, il, elle regarde, nous regarde, vous regarde, and il, elle regarde. Now, is this correct? Is this over? No, it's not. Remember that I told you before about the termination, E, E, S, E, and O, N, S, E, Z, E, N, T. Now is the time to add this termination on the root of the verb. So I already choose a different color for you, so it's gonna be easier to look, to see. So I have the root and the termination, and now I'm gonna read what I have together. Je regarde. I look. And I'm gonna, my second termination, it's es, so now I have the form tu regardes. Il, elle regarde. Nous regardons. Vous regardez. And il, elle regarde. Now the termination ent or ent, it's always silent. We do not pronounce it. It does not mean we're not gonna write it down. We have to write it down, but we'll never pronounce it. So that's why we have il, elle regarde. So now that's going to be your homework. Remember, you have to conjugate a verb that belongs to group number 1. And how are you going to do that? You're gonna remove the termination and you're gonna write down the base, right? You're gonna write down the root and then you're gonna add this termination. And this is how you conjugate the verb in French. It's going to be very easy, just we need a little bit of practice. Bonne chance!